In the early European imagination, the image of African natives was equated to one of almost human savages, mainly because of the nude form of dress. They thought of them as primitive and incapable of governing themselves. So this all led to a derogatory European view of African body and character. Specifically the women, because they were so different than their own women. And the images created of African women was a curvy nude physique, which was exotic and erotic, and their bodies were eroticized. And Sarah Bartman, the Hottentot Venus, is one example of this. She was captured and she was kidnapped and exhibited in London as almost as a work of art, but in an eroticized fashion. However, the African male nude was not studied as fervently because it just wasn't as eroticized as the female nude was. And the reason for that was the male nude in European history and European art indicated heroism and strength, and the African male nude could not live up to European propriety. Because the West did not respect them as much in the past, they did not portray them as invulnerable and powerful as they did the male nude in general in European art. The male nude in general in the past and today creates a perplexed attitude of the public. In general, the West today has become familiarized with the nude female, but the male nude is still taboo. Most people in the West are just not used to seeing a penis as beautiful as they do a nude female. Even the word penis causes some people to feel uncomfortable, shocked, outraged, and however, this has all begun to change. As racism has begun to disintegrate and the West has become more enlightened, Europe aesthetics have begun to change and male nudity has become more prominent. There has been an effort to shelter the mind from viewing the nude male body. The defined form of the male body, or the protruding object between his thighs, was reserved solely for intimate moments. In more recent times, a particularly explorative group of people, primarily photographers, have emerged to visually focus on the nude male form, and particularly the African male. These artists aim to capture the pulchritude of the African nude male by highlighting the color of skin, emphasizing the male body parts, and giving prominence to the exposure of the African male. The artists who capture the essence of the black male body hold a synthetic idea of a combination of beauty, eroticism, and taboo through history. One can only imagine the magnitude of censure these artists must endure from much of the public who feel these unconventional photographs of male nudity are offensive, but the artists do not censor what others may find offensive. They intend to present the full breadth, beauty, and meaning of the African male nude form and portray them as both strong and desirable. I'm going to show you some photographs by Western photographers who praise the black male body through different effects in well-balanced photographs. And careful analysis of the way the photographs themselves are constructed should yield some insight into the logics that guided the creation of their works. And these photographers include Fred Holland-Day, Tony Butcher, and Robert Michael Flick. Thank you. Okay. So this is an image by Fred Holland-Day, who was an American photographer, and his photographs were quite controversial as they depicted nude men. He was one of the first to capture and portray the image of the nude male, the black nude male, and he did so in an allegorical context. This image is titled Ebony and Ivory, and it was taken in 1897. And it depicts a black man named J.R. Carter He's holding a small Greek figurine in his hand, and there's leopard print between his nude, muscular physique. This, along with the darkness of the skin tone, indicates racial dynamic behind the image. In other words, it's somewhat of an African stereotype. And the background is matte black, which is strange considering that usually white backgrounds were used to contrast the difference of the skin tone against the background. However, this arouses a sense of losing the body in space as he fades into the background. The lighting shadows his features, and we see a faint contour of his profile. The lighting also illustrates the boldness of the white Greek figurine. The one-dimensional nature of black body against black background heightens visual awareness of the animal print cloth and the white statue. The Greek figurine is a classical element, and it aids in Day's allegorical context of the predominant discourse of Western colonial exoticism. His work was often homoerotic images within a complex social niche, and although he was one of the first to depict it, he was not the only one. This next image is by Tony Butcher, a photographer from London, and he focuses on capturing the image of the black male nude to praise the gentle and beautiful aspects of their bodies. This one is titled The Nude 2, and it depicts a nude black male with his back facing the camera, and it's only his torso and buttocks that are visible through a broken wooded fence structure which serves as a framework. The framework makes it clear that these parts of the body are the subject of the photograph. Texture is very important here, as the weathered wood and the jagged edges allude to the smoothness of the subject's skin, and it compels the viewer to admire that. The jagged edges at the bottom of the framework point up, pushing the viewer's gaze up, and then the smooth, solid bar at the top pushes the viewer's gaze back down, so that the only thing that you're focusing on is his torso and his buttocks. This all maintains a focus on the body. He uses lighting to contrast the dark skin tone against a completely black background, and this evokes a thought in the viewer's mind that although we label these men black, their skin tone adheres to multiple gradients in light or dark settings. Geometric forms are also evident, with triangles shown with the background, the black background. And this, again, it creates balance and keeps your gaze on the body. Also, asymmetrical balance is evident, where he's not completely in the center of the photograph, so there's nothing really to look at but his body. And there's also the S-curve, which is a part of Western aesthetics of Greek art. The S-curve, it points your eye back down onto his buttocks. The use of wood seems to also advert to the idea that wood is from nature, and it evokes some analytical thought regarding the history of Africans. Wood is from nature, as are humans, and both are of the natural world, in turn humanizing this torso and buttocks with no face. Also, wood is a resource that is naturally, it's nostalgic to people and incorporated into most of human history. Perhaps the use of wood in this photograph indicates a historical reference for both the historical presence of wood and the historical presence of people, particularly people from Africa. Ultimately, this photograph aims to present the male black nude as both beautiful and natural, with a lasting impression on history. And the last photograph that I'm going to show you is by Robert Mapplethorpe, and he was a famous homosexual American photographer who was legendary for his nude photographs that shocked viewers. Most of the men that he photographed were African Americans because he loved the dark color of the skin, and he presented it beautifully with careful lighting. He could extract a greater richness from the color of their skin. And in this untitled photograph, it may seem instantly as a homoerotic image, but to Mapplethorpe, it was more of a collapsed context of homoerotic art in a systematic approach. Everything Mapplethorpe did had to do with system, and it's evident in this photograph. The dark skin is lightened against the dark background, fixating the attention fully on him. And the system also involves the addition of a dimension on the right part of the photograph. It's a light gray rectangle, and it stops the viewer from gazing away from the photograph. There are rows of diagonal lines from the head to his open hand, from the shoulder to his abdomen, and from the elbow to the penis. But all of these lines stop at the rectangular portion on the right. And the reason he's doing this is because he wants the viewer to be trapped in this image and to be forced outside of their comfort zone to see and appreciate the black male body. And he doesn't want you to escape the photograph. He wants you to be fixated on it. And throughout Eurocentric art and photography, the nude male form has been a challenging topic. The male body is more threatening than female nudity, and the penis has been viewed as a repudiated totem of colonial fantasy. As is always the case, it is extremely difficult to generalize on behalf of an entire race or a nation. But these photographs are exclusively created by gay men. And so some may think that the images may be sexualized through that lens rather than inherently sexual themselves. Regardless, the enlightenment of Western aesthetics has allowed artists to move beyond the traditional values in order to exhibit the male black body in its full breadth, form, and beauty. Thank you.
Let me crave your indulgence to reserve your questions, because we'll take them, then we'll have time for the discussion proper. So without much waste of time, let me go to the next presenter, and he's Adedayo Ishola, Irinoye from Obafemi Awolowo University. He'll be giving us a paper on social mobilization, community and advocacy for health in the Nigerian community.
So these are definitions on the topic I'm talking about, the definition of the terms that are embodied in the topic. So I'll just briefly run through this to save time. What community mobilization means and the advocacy. It's an empirical project. So I'm more interested in giving you the processes and the results rather than the meanings attached to the terminologies that are embedded in the topic. But here you have all the definitions. These are the steps in social mobilization. You have the total awareness and full engagement. You have the community mobilization, increased awareness, motivation, and information dissemination. Right. Then community mobilization embraces community information, and it is strategic communication. And we have the Community Information Board in Nigeria, which is an innovative mechanism that helps the community to track their health and well-being of their children, women, and empowers them to participate in making decisions, rational decisions that affect their lives. And a total of 138 communities in 21 states were studied, and the way information is generated, disseminated, and useful for rational decision was studied. And the theoretical concept on which this project was carried out is based on the concept of symbolic interactionism. And this states that the analysis of what people say or do is not sufficient to explain human behaviors. Symbolic interactionism focuses on how meanings, definitions, and labels influence health, illness, and healthcare, and how such meanings are learned through interaction with others and through media messages. In Nigeria, we have a new policy that is just coming on board, the National Health Insurance Scheme. It's new in the sense that it's not generalizable for now. We have some pilot areas where it is being studied, and these has grossly affected the degree of penetration of policies, communications, and informed actions taken by members of the community. The objectives of the study were: 1, to determine the level of social mobilization, strategic communication, and advocacy in community healthcare. 2, to assess the performance of community involvement in health financing in terms of the level of mobilized resources, social inclusion, and financial protection. 3, to establish the determinants of reported performance results, including technical design characteristics, management, organization, and institutional characteristics. The methodology. 25 papers were reviewed between the period of 2005 and 2011. Broad selection criteria were applied. Studies included in the review were the communities actively involved in some form of health financing. The selected papers included articles published in peer-reviewed journals, reports published in formal publication series of international organizations, WHO and so on, internal unpublished documents of academic institutions, and conference proceedings. The analytical framework applied to 14 papers, which followed the framework proposed by Precker et al. Of the 25 papers, 6 were conceptual in nature, 5 were comparative papers analyzing community-based health financing schemes, and the remaining 14 were case studies. The literature selection process, the inclusion criteria. Original review articles, reports, and web page documents based on their relevance to the topic of this study were included for the review process. The titles were logged in the various databases searched and were analyzed against the keyword terms. The results of searches were filtered according to their relevance to this research, and reports not wholly focused on the topic of this study were not included for review. All the retrieved publications had relevance on the state dynamics of the Nigerian healthcare system. A comparative data analysis was done on disease basis and reported. As you can see in the graph, you can see the global trend in the estimated rates of tuberculosis, the incidence of tuberculosis, prevalence, and mortality. And as shown in the graph, you can see before advocacy and strategic communication was intensified in most of the communities, we had a high incidence of TB in the population. But after noticing that the graph was not declining, that is, the incidence rate was not falling, the Ministry of Health had to step up aggressive communication, strategic mobilization, and strategic communication and advocacy. And this included house-to-house campaign, using all the media available, and visits through contact tracing, and using patients that had this disease as a means of reaching out to the community. Those that were cured were being used as role models. Those that still had it were being used as a snowballing effect to reach out to the larger community. And since then, you can see from 2001, the graph started declining. That's the picture in green. Now, the same goes for, the next slide is the estimated absolute number of TB cases and deaths in millions between 1990 and 2011. And as you can see, the graph rose from 1990 to 2011, and from there, there's been a decline due to aggressive social mobilization and advocacy. Globally, the incidence rates of TB and HIV positive TB have been, HIV and TB are sisters they are partners in the disease world, and they have been falling since the mid-90s in the eastern region, and since around 2000 in the Southeast Asia. They peaked around 2002 in Africa and have been falling since then, with increased mobilization, communication, and advocacy. And throughout the period of 2006 to 2011, the donor funding agencies exceeded the domestic funding in the low-income countries, of which Nigeria is one, and with the global fund alone exceeding the contributions, there has been a decline in the incidence, prevalence, and mortality of TB and HIV-related cases. Then we have other papers, other disease cases. 2 minutes. Wow. There are other diseases that were selected to drive home the importance of social mobilization, advocacy, and communication. To save time, I will quickly move to, yes, this is another graph that shows positive changes in health behaviors and documentation with increased preventive health practices. There was greater demand for primary health care and concrete community actions to improve public health through social mobilization and advocacy. Conclusion. The reviewed literature described the phenomenon referred to as community financing in terms of the scheme, design, and implementation. The outcomes of social mobilization, communication, and advocacy have shown improved health practices among most vulnerable groups, women and of childbearing age, pregnant women, infants, and children under the age of 5, with reduction in maternal and infant mortality rates and increase in contraceptive prevalence rates. As the world reviews health care since 2012, work continues in reducing the health inadequacies and inequalities for the poor people. The concern being expressed is that people living in absolute poverty still do not have access to basic services and a healthy environment. As a result, the economic development improves the income and standard of living in many developed countries. An increasing gap is opening up between the rich and the poor, and this is associated with inequitable access to healthcare services. The call now is to give voice to the poor and voiceless, so that they can have greater access in the healthcare service delivered, and they can make rational decisions. Thank you.
That was right on time. The panelists are cooperating with us. We'll call on the third presenter, Ochwada, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Hannington Ochwada, and my presentation is on what I'm calling safari and sexploiting the starved. It's basically on sex tourism in Kenya. And I'm confining myself to the coast of Kenya. And the towns that I'm confining myself are Lamu, Watamu, Malindi, Diani Beach, and Mombasa. And what do I mean by sexploiting the starved? Who are the starved? I'm talking about the Europeans and the Americans and also the Asian who come for sex and romance in Africa. And in line with what Mona has talked about, especially about the bodies, the images of the bodies that the images of African bodies also comes in. And then who are these that come for sex tourism? I'm calling them the big mama. So if there is that, the big mama, and you can see there, we have the coast there with the love, with the heart, right over there. And the ones I'm calling who are coming for this sex are the big mama and the big daddy. And who are the big mama and the big daddy? The big mama and the big daddy are actually the older men and older women who basically come for sex exploitation. And here is Kenya, and this is the area that I am actually concerned with. We have Mombasa, we have Watamu, we have Malindi, we have Lamu, all these spots. And they have Kenya has got very good white sand and very good hotels here, as well as villas which have been built, and the tourists come for holiday and bring in millions of dollars to Kenya. So look, that picture shows these are two young people. First, we have this Kenyan girl, and this could be white, could be brown client who comes, and as you see, they're going to come for sex tourism. And if you look at that, you see this is the coastline of Kenya with the white sand right over here. You can see the tourists are all here. And I selected this picture because most of these tourists, as you can see them here, are older women. Some of them are in their midlife, and a lot of them are older women who are perhaps 60, 50, 65, and above. And the ones you can see over here are beach boys, and also there is a girl. There's a girl you can see over here, and the line here is what is used to restrict those boys and girls from invading this territory. Yet they are there, as you can see. Now the starved, the idea of the starved is, these ones could also be starved, much as these ones could also be starved. So it's a two-way. It's not just one way. It's not the Europeans or Euro-Americans or Asians exploiting the Africans, but it's also those boys and girls exploiting these ones. Prostitution and tourism. Is that real or is it just imagined? Well, we know that children or kids of 10 to 18 years are involved in sex work. And this is very interesting. And the other thing you find is that you find that the clients usually are 45 to 65 Euro-Americans who they usually come to seek to rekindle their sex lives with the teenagers. And as you're going to see, sometimes the parents benefit from the sex trafficking of the girls. And by the way, the parents, we are going to find out that they are really involved. The parents of the girls and the boys are really involved because of the financial situation, because they are also starved just as much as the others are also starved of sex. They are starved of money. And we have the beach boys. The beach boys are involved, and the girls are also involved. The beach boys, those ones, they do two things here. One is the access to us. Sometimes they also provide the sex to the older women and the older men who would like to have it. And here again, it's not just confined to heterosexual. It also goes the other way. There is homosexual or what you can call gay kind of relations which are coming. And the girls who are involved here, who are involved in this whole thing, also do both. They don't necessarily have to be bisexual or kind of, but they do both, depending on what their clients would say. Now, here is prostitution and sex. You will see this ring here. I represent actually, you're going to see prostitution. And within prostitution, there's sex tourism. And sex tourism does not necessarily mean prostitution, but it is found within that, because here there is the sale of the body for money. And there you go. Those are, you're going to see this man and the girl. And as we continue, you're going to see that in Kenya, prostitution is not legal. It is illegal. The authorities and resort owners look away though. And there's the easy part of the sex for tourists. There is also tourism which brings billions, as I've said, and the female and male workers are rewarded financially and materially, and sex workers find boyfriends and girlfriends in these relations. Let's not just leave it there and think that it is just merely sex work. There are cases, and I've got a lot of examples, but which I'm not going to give you right now, but within my paper, there are cases of African men who have moved either to Europe or America or Asia or other places because they have found long-term sex relations. Sorry. And what is safari? You can see. This picture here is taken from a movie. I took it from a movie, and the movie that was produced, particularly on this issue, is called Love Paradise. And Love Paradise, this is a picture which is got from that movie. And this woman is seen to look at sampling out the beach boys. And the beach boys are they are aware of that. They're being sampled out. So which one is going to be? Now here again, now I give you, and I'll let you read this on your own and make a determination. This is now the detailed map. There is Ukunda, Diani, Mombasa, Mtwapa, Bombolulu, Kembala, and Malindi, all this, and also as far as Lamu. And mind you, we are talking about this area. This area we are talking about an area which is religiously, it's mostly Islam. And then how does Islam accommodate this? These are probably questions you would want to ask me much later. But that's what goes on. Then Romans. That's what happens. If you look at that, it's on purpose that I gave this. This is a white lady. She's not a very young lady though. This is she's probably in her 40s, and that boy is probably 18 to 25. And you can see what's there. These are some of the gifts that some of these boys get. They don't get so much. They were given jewelry or something like that. But in most cases, they would go away with about $8 to $10. That's what they are given. And when their friends leave, they leave them something like, probably, according to what they say, is about 1,000. Thank you. And so that's how Muzungu Kenyan relations are symbiotic. You can read that and see it. Now here again, you're going to see, you might think these are Maasai, but you see, because the tourists are interested in the Maasai, they are going to perform Maasai. They are not really Maasai, but they are going to perform it, so that the Mzungu, the Mzungu is attracted to them. These are boys who are coming from there, and they're all, there's all that's going on. Let me just finish up real quick. There we go. Of paradise. This is a picture from a scene. This picture here is from a movie. Now you can see these are older, much older women, and there's one man here. And also there's this whole notion of this sexuality of the African. So he is supposed to satisfy all this, in quote unquote. And there you go again. I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Yeah. A lot of issues there, so you just hang on, write your questions down, we'll get back to him. Let's take the last presenter in this panel, Jane Saffitz. She's doing a paper on the 3 bodies, theoretical insights into the albino body in Tanzania. Are you using slides or it's okay? You've got 10 minutes. Time starts now. Yeah.
In this paper, I draw on 3 conceptions of the body to better understand the albino murders that have in recent years affected much of East Africa. I first consider the phenomenally experienced individual body self and focus on the embodied experiences of Tanzanian albinos. Rumor and discourse feature prominently in Tanzanian narratives about albinism, and discussions of their supernatural powers illustrate popular imaginations of the albino body. I then consider the social body. Here, the body and its parts are representative of society at large and provide a cognitive map for understanding the complex interplay between social and natural worlds. Lastly, I consider the body politique, which I use to refer to the ways in which bodies are disciplined, regulated, and socialized. Also in this paper, I attempt to move away from Western conceptions of the body that problematically assume the separation of a material body and an immaterial mind, and from biomedical understandings of albinism, which lay claim to the quote-unquote truth about albinism, and subsequently deem any other explanation. At the same time, these approaches are rooted in an assumption of the body as both materially and symbolically constituted, naturally and culturally produced, and existing in a particular historical moment. So I'll first provide some context. In the past decade, roughly 150 albinos have been murdered in East Africa, mostly in Tanzania. These murders are said to satisfy demand in a thriving trans-regional market for albino body parts. East Africans share a common set of rumors depicting this phenomenon. Killings are said to occur because some believe that albino body parts are endowed with the power to enrich oneself in normally unpredictable economic activities, especially artisanal mining and fishing. Traditional healers are said to use albino body parts in expensive concoctions designed to remedy a variety of afflictions, and many allege that miners and fishermen are their primary customers. Fishermen supposedly weave the hair of albinos into their nets, and miners are said to sprinkle pulverized albino skeletons along mining beds. Despite the widespread nature of these narratives, I've found the details surrounding the transactions to be contested and often contradictory. Most of these murders have been in western Tanzania, in Mwanza and Shinyanga, often referred to as Sukumaland after Tanzania's largest ethnic group, and is known for, among other things, its proximity to Lake Victoria and the Greenstone Mineral Belt. In recent decades, due largely to neoliberal economic reform, which opened Tanzania to foreign investment, Tanzania's mining sector has experienced a huge boom and now employs many Sukuma in gold, diamond, and Tanzanite mines. Indeed, now there are 1.5 million Tanzanians working directly in artisanal mines. During 2012, I spent 2 months in Sukumaland conducting ethnographic research and attempting to trace chains of supply and demand. So I'll first consider the individual body self. Rumors about the embodied experiences of Tanzanian albinos are illuminating. Here I use the term embodied experience to refer to the bodily aspects of human beings and subjectivity. I describe the ways in which Tanzanian society conceives of the individual albino body and suggest that dominant rumor and discourse reveal a conception of the albino as ontologically liminal and not fully human. I don't wish to imply that there's only one narrative about Tanzanian albinos, nor do I suggest that this narrative is static. But in employing a phenomenological approach, I'm not concerned necessarily with distinguishing between subjective and objective aspects of reality with what is quote-unquote real, but rather I'm interested in the attitudes that people posit toward their social world, as well as by the historical and cultural context that inform the values and assumptions embedded within it. So soon after beginning my fieldwork, it became clear that albinos face intense stigma and discrimination. Because it is a recessively inherited condition, or at least as it's understood in the West, it's not uncommon for two non-albino parents to produce an albino child, and I heard a lot of explanations as to how this can happen. Some say a woman who gives birth to an albino had sex with the ghost of a colonial official. Some others say that the albino child is the ghost of a colonial official. This notion that albinos are somehow related to or manifestations of ghosts recurred frequently. Related to this idea that albinos are ghosts is the perception that they never die, but they simply vanish. One rumor suggests that women bear albino children if another person laughs at the woman during her pregnancy, or some say that the mother had sex with a Mzungu, or a white person. So I present these details to illustrate how rumor functions to relegate the albino to a position that is less than fully human. So albinos are perceived to occupy a distinct ontological category. So for example, the embodied experience of a person who quote-unquote never dies but simply vanishes is likely to be fundamentally different from one who dies in a quote-unquote normal way. Similarly, ghosts, or apparitions of dead people, are nebulous entities with varying degrees of transparency, capable of affecting change in natural and supernatural realms, that their form and substance are largely unknown, and that the contours marking the confines of their being are ill-defined suggests that they inhabit an essentially different body self than that of another human. In this way, through their connection to ghosts, the albino is deemed capable of collapsing binaries between the natural and supernatural, live and dead, human and not fully human. Moreover, competing discourses from the West may also reveal Tanzanian conceptions of the body. So albino murders have attracted significant international attention. NGOs and media organizations work to disseminate alternative narratives rooted in human rights and biomedicine. Western perceptions of albino killings reflect a specific epistemological framework rooted in the Cartesian legacies of Enlightenment thinking. Western distinction between mind and body has resulted in a fairly mechanistic conception of the body, replete with irreconcilable dichotomies. Tanzanians, however, appear to have less rigid constructions of an individual body self that is not simply comprised of two distinct entities, mind and body. In this case, albinism is both a medical condition and an ontological category that can be attributed to the breaking of social and moral codes, like having sex with the ghost of a colonial official, or malevolent social relations, like someone bewitching the mother during her pregnancy, or social or familial discord, like an extramarital affair. So that albinism is once a physical affliction and an ontological category suggests a view of the human body in which mind, flesh, and spirit coalesce such that they cannot be isolated into constituent parts. I next consider the social body and offer a parallel between Tanzanian conceptions of the albino body and experiences of how local extractive industries operate in relation to global commodity chains. This section is largely informed by Mary Douglas's claim that the body is quote-unquote good to think with. So for Douglas, the human body is a natural symbol and rich metaphor through which individuals and societies understand other natural and social relations. Douglas also notes that in many societies, social relations are critical to the relative health of an individual body. As such, disease in the body and disease in society inform each other. So as explored in my analysis of the individual body self of the Tanzanian albino, we can see that albino skin is fetishized in myriad ways. And indeed, the body's surface takes on specific meaning in the Tanzanian context. So here I find helpful Louise White's work on the circulation of rumors about vampires in British East Africa. She argues that curative therapies target the skin and that healing was a matter of treating the body's surface. As different things topically were applied to the skin and understood to penetrate the skin, alter the body's interior, and cause foreign matter to rise to the surface. She attests to the privileged status of the body's surface not in terms of metaphor, but because of its generative potential as a center through which the body heals itself. So for many East Africans, disease was thought to lie at the body's surface. We can view this in contrast to Western constructs of biomedicine, in which medicine is thought to work through its interaction with the body's interior, in our cells or in our blood. So if following Douglas we take the body as metaphor, we can extend this notion of the generative potential of the body's surface to lakes and mining beds in which valuable commodities lie just beneath the surface. Here we can see why it might be that miners sprinkle albino bones on the mining beds and fishermen line their nets. Both reflect attempts to transform the composition of what lies beneath the Earth's surface with the hope that certain matter will rise to the top. The similarities between fish and gold on the one hand and albino body parts on the other are significant. Neoliberal economic restructuring has contributed to the creation of entire industries whose work consists of penetrating the earth to extract valuable commodities that are bought and sold in markets for other use. Just as the job of a miner or fisherman is to extract these resources for their market potential, albino hunters too extract valuable resources to be traded and sold in regional markets. So lastly, I wish to discuss the body politique, because metaphor, I think, fails to account for the ways in which power is exercised over bodies. So fundamental to the body politique is Foucault's work on how societies and governments function to reproduce and socialize the types of bodies that serve their interest. So we can see how the Tanzanian state, in its embrace of economic liberalization, might be most invested in the bodies it deems productive. And so in a capitalist society, valuable bodies are synonymous with those that are able to reproduce their labor power. And the expansion of the artisanal mining industry has meant that power is increasingly concentrated in bodies that were previously devalued for their inability to increase the state's wealth. So while the state has been quick to denounce albino killings through strongly politicized rhetoric, its actions have consisted of constructing safe houses and boarding schools, which I argue has relegated the albino to a sort of invisible position in society. And so in this case, I think that the state, while you can argue that this is one form of protection, I see it as the state engaging in a more subtle form of violence through which they are rendering a population invisible to the masses. I also see this as revealing the state's belief that the albino body is innately feeble, and that the state is not investing in this population because it doesn't see them as productive in the capitalist sense. So hopefully here we've been able to see, that we can deconstruct and problematize Western conceptions of the body, and we can see that the body is at once phenomenally experienced, a natural symbol, and also an instrument of social and political power. These three bodies also constitute different theoretical approaches, phenomenological, structural, and post-structural, which it seems to me are all necessary to the formation of a sufficiently nuanced view of the human body as naturally and culturally produced. So while these methodological and conceptual approaches hopefully help broaden our understanding of albino murders, we should not treat the three bodies as exclusive categories in which we can place all aspects of bodily experience. Rather, we should remain committed to a fluid, ever-evolving conception of the albino body through which various subjective experiences can emerge. Thanks.
Well, you've heard them all. I think we'll get back to the audience now. The papers from the themes they've examined are somehow related. The papers on body, we have about 3 papers on body. The one we just heard by Jane. The one on Sexploitation by Ochwada. And then, of course, the first one by Mona Hamedani. All of them are related in their subject matter in terms of focusing on the body and all that. We would have to take questions from the audience. We have 30 minutes within which to do this, so we intend to have a very robust discussion. Let me start with you. After that, I get to her. So please limit your questions to issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to put my question to Ochwada. And the question is prostitution really illegal in Kenya? How come Kenya is becoming a notorious sex center? And what have you prescribed as some sort of mitigations? Okay.
You will note that. Just hold on.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's take like 3 and then we'll discuss. Take another 3.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's a question and a comment toward the sex tourism as well. I was wondering if in Kenya, in the local community, do you have, well, in Rwanda we call it daddy sugar and the mommy sugar, but they are all local. It's all the women with young men,
Yeah.
but all Rwandese. And then old men with young lady.
Yeah.
Then we call them mommy sugar, daddy sugar. So I was wondering, because what you presented to us is more white versus black, and I was wondering if you have also
Variations,
on a local level.
Yeah. We'll take you and then we'll break. They will respond and then we'll move on.
Yeah, well, just wanted to ask a question to Ochwada and then the last presenter. To Ochwada, what is the impact of this relationship? Because recently we've been hearing about murders. One white guy married a certain lady, and he was eventually left penniless, and he's actually begging around for survival. He can't even go back to Germany. So what's the impact of this sex tourism? Who is benefiting more? Is it the local people or the foreigners? There was a woman who was also murdered. She was fighting the husband over a property, over a hotel, and then she ended up getting murdered. And then her body was discovered in a sinkhole. So that the case is going on. So what could you say something about the impact of this sex tourism? The question about, to the last presenter about the albinos. Did you say that Africans believe that disease resides, if you want to treat the disease, you deal with the body? I don't know whether I have you correctly. Did you say that the African conception of disease is the disease resides on the body, on the physical body? And if you want to treat it, and that's where you focus on the physical treatment of exactly what
We'll take one more for any of these persons. Yeah.
I have a question for Mona. It's interesting that you chose maple top as one of those images, because in that very same category, there is a very stereotypical image of an African male. I think the name is leopard hunter or something, with a stick and something ridiculous like that. But I was wondering what motivated you to choose maple top and read it in that particular way, because the other way reading maple top would be he objectifies the black male body, specifically the male penis, and that's why I'm wondering what drove you to choose Maple Talk to talk about the representations of African bodies in a manner that is artistic.
It's okay, you respond. We have 5 minutes to do this round one.
Okay.
So let's start with you.
All right. Prostitution is illegal in Kenya. It's there in the statute and has been like that for some time, for quite some time. But do not forget, tourism brings a lot of money to Kenya. And in most cases, actually, what happens is that the governmental authorities, a lot of them, the police, I would put the police in this case, and all those who administer, they tend to look aside. And don't forget, there is something called corruption, which is also eating up. And so once they are given some money by those who are involved, they tend to look aside. So that is there. But some people have been taken to court for doing that. Some men, some women have been deported. And unfortunately, the laws in Kenya which don't allow this, people keep moving and coming in for that. So I don't know if I've answered your question.
What are the mitigations
They're saying,
to prevent this notoriety?
yeah, there are a lot of, we have a lot of organizations which are taking place. The current Supreme Court judge, a woman, was involved in that when she was still doing that. And we have all these organizations which are taking, they are working in conjunction with the international countries
The
like
government
Britain.
itself is closing its eyes on sex tourism because they make money from it.
That's what he said. He
Yes.
said that, yeah.
Mhm. Now, in the local community, we have sugar. I decided to focus on actually the outsiders, the big mamas and the big daddies who come in. But within, we have the locals who also get involved in this. They come from our country, also go to the coast and engage in that. And we have seen this going on. It is there. It is there. And on the impact, the impact is massive. But morally, when you look at the south coast or the coast itself, the coast of Kenya, there's a lot of moral decadence, and the communities there are up in arms. But in most cases, because they are poor, the families also engage and they shield all this that's going on. In the cases of those people who have been found, let's not put it this way, let's not over-exaggerate and say, well, that this is, the bad side is what is most. No, we have that side that also is, as they say, good for those ones. I've not been dealing with moral issues here. I just wanted to present the picture and help me come up with what we can deal with in terms of the morality.
It's okay. You will respond. You have questions, right? So respond. Yeah. Someone asked you a question.
Yeah, so I was referencing Louise White's work, and she was looking at medicine during the colonial era in the 40s and 50s. And her argument was essentially not that disease was thought to lie at the surface, but that disease could be treated at the body's surface, so by applying different plant matter and animal fat to the body's skin. So I was speaking mostly to the skin as like a privileged site that allows the body to then heal whatever is inside.
But what about you yourself? What's your view about that?
I mean, I in my field work, I haven't come across like a lot of people that think that. And so I can't personally speak to whether I think that this is like a commonly held belief now or not. I don't really know.
It's okay. You can take her on after this. Yeah, you have a question.
So the reason that I chose to portray Maplethorpe in more of an artistic concept was I had already discussed the allegorical, stereotypical idea with Fred Holland Day in the first slide, and I had another slide by a Nigerian photographer, but I didn't have enough time, and his was more, it had more of an idea of political expression. But, so that's why I chose to use one of Mapplethorpe's photographs that was more artistic, so that we had a sense of how it was portrayed in more of an artistic sense rather than a political sense, so that we kind of had a mixture of ideas. But in my paper, I do have those photographs of Mapplethorpe, but that's a great question.
It's okay. We will take another set of questions. Let me start with that.
Okay. My question is for Jane. I'm really interested in how you talked about the way that albinos are perceived as possibly the ghost of a colonial official or possibly the child of. And I immediately thought of Louise White's work on vampires and everything, which you referenced. But it seems to me, and I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly, but she interprets the rumors about vampires as being a sort of way of coping with or understanding colonial experiences and technology which seem to come without context. And I'm curious if you see this thing with albinos as being the same thing, or is the colonial ghost just like a sort of new way of interpreting albinism?
I mean, I think.
Hold on.
Okay, mine was also for you. I was wondering, since you said you did field research for 2 months in the area where they were killing albinos, were you at all worried for yourself? Because I know sometimes I mean, I don't know if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, she knows.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you very much. I have a question for Mona, and then 2 quick comments on Ochwada and Jane. Probably starting with Mona.
Okay.
I wanted to find out if you do not think that the Western, perhaps, image of the black body is the way it was presented those days, did not present somebody with maybe beast-like characteristics in terms of the sexual strength. In particular, the ones that the nude body that you showed us, the last one, don't you think it's an expression of that view of the African male as having, sexual prowess almost to the level of a beast? And this is why during the Arab slave trade, and also during the transatlantic slave trade, the African male had to be kept away from the white female because of that fear. And then maybe a comment for Ochwada. Probably what I would say is that one of the very, very devastating effects of those relationships is the very high intensity of drug addiction among the African communities along the Kenyan coastline. We have and of course the issue of HIV/AIDS, which you might want perhaps to explore more. And maybe for Jen, I totally agree with you that probably we need to give more visibility to the albinos. In Kenya, for example, I know that one of the judges of the High Court, a lady, is an albino, and I think that has changed a lot of perception of the way we look at the albinos. And recently, I think there's a nominated member of parliament, and that I think has changed the society's way of looking at them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One more. You.
2 quick questions for Jane, because you talk about Foucault and the idea that by putting them into boarding school, they're essentially hiding them. But by putting them and corralling them in this one space, aren't they making them that much more visible and that bigger of targets? Because I remember visiting one of these boarding schools in Okpeh, Tanzania 3 years ago, and the worry was always that they would get attacked from the outside, right? Because they would have this. I'm wondering how you square the fact that part of your argument is that they're hiding them from society, while at the same time, they're being made hyper-visible because it's easier to get a hold of them, right? And their bodies are classified more as being problematic by putting them all in this confined space. And then my other question is for you, sir. I forget your name. And you talk about symbolic interactionism, which I thought was really interesting. But I'm also wondering, while people go about, people who've been affected by TB walk and talk to other people and educate them about this, how big of a role does stigma play as defined by government, right? How big of a role does stigma, them being stigmatized even more in society? Is there a danger of that happening? And if that's the case, what are the actual policies that are being put into place to deal with the level of stigma that may appear when people suffering from TB talk to other people?
All right. You, okay.
Okay. So the first question about Louise White, her work has been helpful in a lot of ways, but her argument about like rumors about vampires as being a way of like East Africans dealing with colonialism, I actually don't agree with, and I don't think that's what's at play. I think part of this comes from like some difference between disciplines, that she's a historian and I'm in anthropology, and so I object to some of her interpretations because she's starting with the assumption that vampires can't possibly be real, and so rumors about them must mean something else. And I think as an anthropologist, I need to take informants intellectually seriously, and if, you know, so I would like to try to get away from those sort of assumptions like embedded in the analysis. To me, it's a little bit of like a functionalist argument, so I don't think that I could say that, you know, that like albino murders could be explained by like neoliberalism or something like that. I think that's like a little bit too simple. So yeah, and then next question about my safety there. Most people, you know, it wasn't a problem. I did go to Irinoye Island in Lake Victoria for some time, and there was a sort of series of festivals to raise awareness for albinism and spread different discourses about like biomedical explanations and human rights. And there were like a few little kids there that thought I was an albino, but you know, everyone else just kind of laughed about it, and that was about it. And then the idea of like the safety or the hypervisibility of the boarding schools. My understanding of the boarding schools and the safe houses is that there is a lot of security. Like they're all gated communities, and so no one has actually been attacked or been targeted that's been at one of these places. So I think that since a lot of outsiders aren't coming in and out, and since there's very high security, I mean, the district commissioner doesn't allow anyone, I mean, you have to go through the district commissioner to even have access to go to one of these places. So I don't think that they're at risk of more danger by being there. I think that they become hyper visible in a different way through like NGOs that, you know, like take pictures of albino children and then broadcast them all over the world. So in a way, it's like they're invisible in their own country, but then hyper visible to the West, and like people that want to believe certain things about, you know, like vulnerable populations in Tanzania.
Right.
Yeah, so just to reiterate your question, it was asking if the subjects could be portrayed in another negative way. It could. I'm not saying that they couldn't, but as far as my research went, I didn't really see anything in those photographs, especially the last one, as you mentioned, that by Maplethorpe. That one was a very systematic photograph. So it didn't really have any meaning behind it, rather than showing that the African body is beautiful, and the form of the use of diagonal lines and trapping the person in the image. But the other ones did have more of an allegorical context. But as far as that one, nothing that I saw, but it could, you know.
Hold on, let him, he has a question. Let him answer. We'll take the next one. Yeah, please.
Yes, thank you. In the past, there was a lot of stigmatization. And a whole family, you have families that are wiped out by TB, just like HIV, and sometimes a combination of both. But now, with increased awareness, with increased strategic communication, and with some policies in place now, the level of stigmatization is drastically reduced. One, you now have more awareness in the society. Two, the government has gone ahead, they've created some centers that are detached from the hospitals. They're called youth-friendly centers. And in these centers, you have recreational facilities, you have internet facilities, you have cash points in these centers. So you don't necessarily go in there as a TB patient. You just walk in there as if you're going for any other activity that takes place in that center. You could go there for shopping, you could go there for games, you could go there for internet services. So you now have a traffic of people moving in, moving out, not necessarily labeled as a TB clinic. And then we don't reckon with TB patients as patients any longer. We call them clients. So, and in addition, in addition, yes, we have counseling groups within the society who are even non-medics, like pastors, imams, elders in the society, who assist in mobilization and they act as watchdog for the community. And they report cases, and such cases are treated with utmost confidence.
Thank you very much. We are taking the last round of questions and comments. You were trying to say something.
Oh yeah, I was just going to make a comment in relation to the question posed to Mona about other readings that could be deducted from the image of Robert Mapplethorpe. Every image, every artistic representation of creativity actually embodies, 2 or 3 levels, of ideas. The formal, qualities, which he actually, detailed out in explaining, how the image is projected. Then you have, at the level of, signification, which is basically framed, by the lens of the viewer, and there can be ideological, ideas, being imputed to the image, which the person who shot the photograph, like Mapplethorpe, or the person who created the form, could not have actually, imputed to the image. So the work of art essentially is left within the public view, for people to make, their own, sense out of the form. So it depends on who is viewed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
For the sexploitation, I'm just curious. You said that some people go to court and stuff. So if you do get caught and it's someone from America, Europe, do they come back and does it catch up to them? Does your life get ruined because of it? Do they get punished here also in their own countries? Or and then some people do it just for fun or romance, and there is a threat of disease or pregnancies. How do they deal with that? If something like that were to happen, I mean, how do you go about saying, oh well, I'm about to have, I conceived a child with you, or you gave me this, or I mean, how do they deal with all that?
Yeah.
Thank you. My position right now is like a kind of intellectual sparkle for Mona. And it is, what do you think or you feel the European has concerning whiteness and blackness on like female black.
Did you get that?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I said it's the kind of intellectual puzzle for you. What are your feelings on whiteness or blackness or European on the female black bodies? That may not be something you can answer right now. It can be like some intellectual sparkle for you.
Okay.
But it's necessary to create gender balance in that area.
It's okay. We'll take the last one.
I have 2 comments. One of them is for Harrington, and your paper really reminded me of a similar social type of situation in the 1970s and 1980s, whereby Euro-American tourists would go to the Haitian island also for sex tourism. And I'm wondering if you've come across that, if you've thought about that in relation, because the 2 situations seem fairly similar to what's happening on the Kenyan coast. My other comment is for Mona. In addition to what has been said, I didn't see the lady at the back, but kind of jumping along that, I think we're all kind of wondering how you engage with the rest of Mapplethorpe's book, because it's a little difficult to engage with simple one image And as much as you have your own individual responsibility to read it as you wish, there are also these other images of maple puppets that are circulating in society, and we kind of have them in our mind. And there's a lot of criticism about that and the way it achieves African American males. So we're wondering how you kind of need to, and I feel the need for you to engage with that as well as you read that.
Yeah. You want to start responding, or he starts?
I can.
Please go.
Okay.
Briefly, we're almost at the nick of time.
Okay. So I have given a lot of thought to the idea of, and especially from the past, I don't like it. I don't think that the way that they fetishized it is proper. I think that they should have done it in a more in a way where they express the beauty in form rather than eroticizing it. And the reason that I chose to do the male one is because they haven't shown, there isn't much on the African male body. There's many things written about the African female body and how the West, like the kidnapping of Sarah Bartman and the kidnapping of many African women to expose their bodies against their will, rather than, there wasn't much about the African male. And in response to your comment, I agree that, there could have been more images of Maplethorpe shown. I chose to show one different, more of an artistic approach to it, was because, I responded to the man in the back's question. I had already shown a political, expressive, allegorical context previously, so I wanted to kind of mesh it up, and I think that there wouldn't have been enough time to go into depth about there's a lot about Maplethorpe, so, but I agree. I think that's great.
Do you want to respond?
Oh, yes. Let me start with your question, which is, I've been reading a lot of literature about what happens in the Caribbean and also the East Asian countries. There is a similarity in many ways in the way African bodies are perceived by especially those who are coming out. And also the other thing is, what's happening with Kenya is that some of those tourists do not come for sex, but then they are caught up in that web, where the beach boys and the girls, they go out at night, and mostly it's at night when they get them because of the illegality of the activity. And they make them look like, well, this is somebody who has fallen in love with you the first time. And so they get caught up in this and they work on it. And then tied to the same, sometimes those was, the girls and the boys are, mostly it's actually the girls. The girls who are involved get pregnant. And when they get pregnant, that's their own, it's their own business. It's no business of the others. The boys who have, there are boys who have gotten these relations with those with marriageable age and gone to Europe. And for example, there was a case of this man who got married for 15 years, and he was in Germany. He did all he could, raised his children, but then had a very bitter divorce and came back. And they're still considered that way. There is really nothing they can do about it. And as I said again, it would be fun. It would also be something that those who do it, and they're notorious of doing it. Like there was a case of an American who went to Kenya and decided to do it both with the mother and the child. First, abused the child, and secondly, the girl, because the mothers also who have been involved in this sex work give away their children. It's no morality. The line of moralness is not there. So they give away their children, and was involved in that. He was a child abuser here in this country, had been convicted, but then they caught up with him later, and he was put in jail for 25 years when he came and married the mother of the girl.
Okay. On that, yeah, you.
Yeah, just one last question for the last speaker.
Yeah.
It would be nice if we could, or if you could think, further to actually give figures to tally with some of these, paradigms that you're giving us. You're giving us examples, that we can see sample population, whether in clusters, to see, how much, has been done in terms of study of this group, and to actually validate, that this actually happened. It's got to be in the literature, and for others, to follow through, that kind of investigation, because, it looks kind of sketchy.
Thank you. For your information, let me tell you this. I've done this for the purpose of just presentation. I've got the figures, I've got the percentages, I've got all these that are coming up in my paper. So thank you so much.
It's okay. The chairman of the panel want to say one or two things. I've allowed you to keep talking. It's now my time. My turn, rather. I was wondering, what has been the response of the albinos in Tanzania to this aggression or violation of their rights and all that? Your paper was a little bit quiet on that. It's as if they are just there helpless. They've not done anything that will portray them as people who have resisted the way society has stereotyped, them and all that. I think we need to, let's look at them as a group, as a group. How have they responded to this aggression? Your paper was a little bit quiet on that. I don't know if you may want to share with us from your field work, if you have seen what they are doing. Do they have associations that try to defend their rights as human beings, in Tanzania? If they do, how have this association, achieved this thing about integrating the albino in the Tanzanian society and then protecting him or her as a human being? Do you have examples of that from your survey? Because you were a little bit quiet on that. To the man, you try to draw a distinction between prostitution and sex tourism. Is it possible to make one part of the other? At what point do they intersect? Prostitution, tourism. While you were presenting, you say prostitution and tourism are two different things. But do they relate? In my own thinking, they relate. Yes. And they intersect at certain points. You need to be a prostitute to be part of the sex tourism. You necessarily have to be a prostitute to be part of the sex tourism. But I don't know if, because you were trying to draw, at the conceptual level, you were drawing some distinctions. You did not, you need to throw light on that too, because so that we don't leave here with this impression that prostitution is different from sex tourism, or sex tourism is different from prostitution. I thought one is supposed to be part of the other, or unless, of course, there are issues that distinguish both. You want to
Thank you. Let me just say one small thing. To be a good sex tourist, you have to be really graduated in prostitution, and that's why prostitution comes in. But you see, there are other sex tourists. They're categorized that they don't come in because they're coming in for sex, but they're caught in that way. So that becomes a subset. And there are few people like that. They are caught in that, and where they go, they are swept by the wind because they are involved with the prostitutes. And prostitutes can either be male or female, can be of either sex. Thank you. I will look into that.
Draw that distinction when you look at. There's an announcement here. The panels, the afternoon panel starts by 2, and participants are encouraged to be back in time so that we can begin. We started rather late. On that note, let me thank all of us, the panelists, and then the audience for a very robust session. Stay around, there are more of these. Thank you very much.